Mistake number one when trying to improve your aim is the idea of focusing on your crosshair more than you focus on your target. And when I say that, I quite literally mean focusing on your crosshair with your eyeballs as opposed to looking at your target with your eyeballs. It seems like a pretty simple concept, but I feel like a lot of people struggle with this, and I feel like it gets in the way of their aiming improvement, and I'll explain why. So whenever you are aiming, let's say you're aiming down sights and you have this very definitive red dot reticle in the middle of your screen, and the red dot reticle is what you're focusing on. What you're doing is you're taking away from your ability to look at your target instead, and you're taking away from your ability to read, recognize, and react to how your target might change direction within a specific movement pattern. So for example, if I'm strafing left and right, this is like a close strafe, and someone was looking at me as opposed to their crosshair, they would have a much easier time reacting to my changes of direction within this specific movement pattern, as well as changes in that movement pattern in of itself. If I start jumping, if I decide to maybe have a longer strafe to the left or to the right, focusing on your target as opposed to your crosshair is going to allow you the opportunity to better react to whatever movements your target is making in front of you. The way that I look at the crosshair is that it's this reminder of where the center of your screen is, and it isn't necessarily something that you should rely on to know where that center point in your screen is. If you want to fix this problem, and if you want to better work on your ability to be in tune with where the center of your screen is without necessarily having to hyper focus on your crosshair, I would definitely recommend going into an aim trainer and just turning your crosshair off in the aim trainer and play tracking exercises. That's definitely going to help your ability to be in tune with the center of your screen. Obviously, you're going to want to have some feedback, like hit sounds or whatever, that allow you to know when you are or are not hitting the target. But yeah, that's a really good way to fix that problem. This kind of a mistake isn't necessarily a mistake at longer ranges. Like, for example, if I am looking at this target here, I have to be pretty mindful of where my crosshair is above the target so that I can properly lead up enough to be able to hit it. And this is obviously more applicable to targets at long range. Like, let's say I grab a Kraber and I have someone moving and jumping around in front of me. I need to be mindful of where my crosshair is relative to where they are, but at no point in time I'm going to be cross-eyeing on my crosshair as much as I am going to be hyper focusing on how my target is moving. And that's how a lot of times I hit the shots that I do or track people the way that I do, because I'm just so focused on how they're moving, and I'm not necessarily worried about where my crosshair is or my reticle is, because I already know where the center of my screen is for the most part. With the new ability to configure the dummy movement, there's a couple different ways that you can approach tracking in Apex Legends. Tracking by definition is the ability to kind of glue your crosshair onto a target. And there's a couple of different ways and means for you to accomplish that. The first, and probably what is the most common for a lot of people, is to react to individual changes in direction within a specific movement pattern. So you can see that when the dummy changes direction, I react. That is one way that you can approach tracking. The way that I like to track, though, or at least the way that I try to track most of the time, is through prediction and through game sense. So instead of reacting to each individual change in a target's movement pattern, I just try to predict the overall movement pattern in of itself. And what happens is you get this almost controller-like tracking, if you can pull this off correctly, where you basically are just predicting and are a couple of steps ahead, and it can actually look almost like aimbot. So the way that I would go about doing this would be to just simply focus on predicting the bot's pattern of movement. I would personally recommend using something like the P20, or just not even shooting at all, so that you can really take advantage of the bot being alive. Another kind of tracking exercise that we can use the firing range to execute is the idea of tracking with single fire weapons as opposed to flicking. Lots of mouse and keyboard players kind of abuse the freedom of movement that they have. This kind of leads them to do lots of unnecessary flicks with the wingman, which look cool because it looks like you're, being really proactive when you do it, right? Instead, I would just recommend learning how to track with the wingman. I know a lot of the reason why some people might flick with Iron Sight wingman especially kind of going up and down sometimes, is to help compensate for the visual recoil. Another really good exercise to kind of do is to practice tracking the bot's movement with your eyes. I can simply just kind of look here and put my gun away and focus on really looking at the bot's movement with my eyeballs, not focusing on the little, white dot that's in the middle of my screen, not looking at my reticle either, just focusing on looking at my target instead of my crosshair. Because obviously we want to be looking at and focusing on the thing that we're trying to do damage to, not one of the things that we're using to do damage with, right? You can actually practice on those targets all the way out here